plug this.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome. It's the 49th episode of the Unfiltered and Undiscovered podcast, and I'm sitting here in Brisbane. We've got a little bit of rain outside. We've had 2 days of heat waves that Adelaide sent to us from last week, and of course, sitting there in Adelaide with a can of Kangaroo Island's finest. Let's welcome Dave Bragg. How are you, Braggy?
I'm very good, mate. And it's a lovely day here. A little bit windy, but sunshine, 25 degrees. So, gorgeous weather. No rain like you got there.
Oh, but we needed the rain. It's been so hot. The last 2 days have been real stinkers. So,
okay.
Now, we've got a couple of really good episodes coming up. I don't want to jinx them because every time I announce something happens that falls over. But everyone, please listen for the next couple of weeks. We got some great interviews with some great musical talent from back in the day. It's so exciting. So,
well, these guys were, they broke ground in the 80s. They were leading the charge.
Absolutely, and there's so much relevance around what they did back in the day to what's happening now. And I guess that's part of the reason why I've prepared tonight's show, which is all about some of the songs that shaped Brisbane, right? So
love it.
As everyone who listens to the show knows that I'm a very strong Brisbane music fan. Back in the 80s, mainly underground, independent music. And when we were just scratching around for an idea on the show, I said, Braggy, can I just do, 7 songs that shaped Brisbane? And he said, yeah, let's do it. So that's what we're doing. So what are some of the bands that came from Brizzy, Braggy?
Well, obviously I think the biggest band's probably Powderfinger, right?
Yeah.
The Go-Betweens is a massive band from that time that you're talking about, and the Saints.
Yeah.
Possibly the first ever punk band in the world, people say.
Yeah.
Don't know if that's true or not. You might have a better idea on that. Who else? Hey, what about the Bee Gees, man?
Yeah, I suppose their birthplace was in Brisbane.
Yeah.
And, so, my mum used to share stories about the Bee Gees because she was a young girl when they were playing around some of the pubs in northern New South Wales.
I guess if you put it in context, Tony, Brisbane in the 80s... I think the reason a lot of great bands came out and a lot of new music ground was broken then, it's probably like Liverpool in the 60s, it's a working town, it's not London, it's not Sydney, it's a backwater sort of place, and people are trying to get out of there any way they can.
The Riptides were a Brisbane band who you may or may not hear about later on, but they put out a song called Lonely Old Sunday, and it was all about Brisbane just sleeping on a Sunday. There was nothing to do.
Yeah.
And that was the sense. And when you think of the independent bands that were going around, Sydney had this real vibe, and everyone thought you had to go to Sydney to make it. Mm. And then Melbourne thought they were better than Sydney, so much so that a band in Melbourne called the Zimmerman put out a song called Don't Go to Sydney.
Yeah.
And so you've got this real, it was just such an amazing scene to be part of. And you had these Brisbane people who sort of felt that they weren't quite where they needed to be. But when you go back and you look at some of the music and you listen to it, they had such a diverse... a musical industry.
And let's not forget that you had a pretty oppressive government there with Mr. Bajocki Peterson.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that while we talk about this, we're going into another form of the Fitzgerald inquiry.
Yes. So. What goes around comes around.
It's Queensland after all. So the first band I'm going to talk about is probably going to be a bit of a surprise that I'm going to talk about them so early. And the song is probably going to be a bit of a surprise. So I'm going to talk about the Go-Betweens. Now, there's not too many bands, I'd imagine, in Australia that have a bridge named after them. And one of our major toll bridges here in the city is named the Go-Between Bridge and after the Go-Betweens. So that gives you an understanding of the legacy that this band had. They formed in 77 and they sort of broke up in 89. Now, the majority of the time, the most known band members, Robert Forster and Grant McLennan, and they were joined at various stages along the way. But Rob Vickers, one of the original bass players, once again, and you're going to hear this a lot during tonight, around my school, Corinda High and Oxley High, it was just such a music vibe, and Rob went to Oxley High, I believe. And,
wow.
And then Go-Betweens sort of cut ground with Lindy Morrison as the drummer as well. And there wasn't a lot of female drummers going around in those particular days. So the real genius in the Go-Betweens, and I'm sure you appreciate this, is the songwriting. It was the chemistry between Forster and McLennan, and largely left alone on the charts, unfortunately, both here and in the UK, where they were ultimately more popular. And it's probably challenging to call them a Brisbane band. They formed in Brisbane, but they spent more time overseas than what they actually did in Brisbane.
Oh, but their music is so Brisbane.
It is.
So they're definitely a Brisbane band. They couldn't have come from anywhere else.
Grant McLennan unfortunately passed away from a heart attack back in, I think it was 06. But they actually named one of the Queensland Music Awards after him. They've called it the Grant McLennan Lifetime Achievement Award. So, once again, part of that legacy. Now, the song I'm going to play is probably going to surprise many people, because they're probably expecting me to pull out Lee Remick, which was one of their very first song put out on the Able Records, Lee Remick, or Karen, or which was the B-side.
I love how you've got all the props there as well.
Which was, Karen. I remember seeing the Go-Betweens at the University of Queensland Refectory, and they played Karen as one of their encores, and Karen is such a simple song. It's Karen, yeah, Karen. And the whole crowd was just jumping up and down. So for a band like the Go-Betweens, they probably didn't... That was as close to the mosh pit as what I think you got when they did that song. But, some of their more well-known songs, of course, Spring Rain, Streets of My Town. But the song I'm going to play is a song that was actually in 2001 was awarded by the Australian Performing Rights Association as one of the top 30 songs. Now, when you consider the best the Go-Betweens ever did in Australia was number 80 on the top 100, and that was, I think, with Streets of Our Town.
Yes.
It's quite phenomenal that a song builds a legacy after that to be named in the top 30 songs. And of course, I'm talking about Cattle and Cane. So for people that know this song,
good choice.
It's just a beautiful song. It's quite drifting and quite enigmatic in its lyrics, and it's a reminder of all those times. The Queensland, out in the sun, out in the timber, and
it's Cattle and Cane, mate.
Here it is. because I've got so many, I've got to try and keep these to just below. But that's such a beautiful song, and it's interesting. Yeah, even when he describes his own music, McLennan's a real poet. He called that. It's not nostalgic. He says it's a sloppy yearning for the past.
But what about the film clip, Tony?
Yeah,
It's like they're in a shed on a cane farm.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Or a cattle farm, where just a clip. But just, the film clip itself. It's like that's where they're in. They're in a shed. You can smell the cattle and the cane. Yeah.
And the interesting thing, he wrote that to please his mother. And the funny thing was, because where the mum lived, they didn't have 240 volts electricity, so he had to sing it to her down the phone. So,
Wow.
pretty cool. So now I'm going to take a complete abrupt turnaround, and I'm going to talk about a band called the Pineapples from the Dawn of Time. So,
Okay, I don't know this band. But I love that name.
Pineapples from the Dawn of Time. They're a psychedelic punk band, and really limited time they actually played together. In reality, I think it was between 85 and 87 they played. But they put this song out, and it's a song that is just an absolute classic for Queensland. It began as a quartet. They dressed up. They had ridiculous costumes. They really tapped into that 60s counterculture.
So what years are we talking here for this band?
This is 85 and 87 they played. They came back and reformed to some degree in 2000. And then they came back and performed at Pig City, which was a huge event that they had at Queensland Uni honouring, the musical history of Queensland.
Okay.
So this song, the 60s counterculture, and they had unfortunately a bit of an icon around that Charlie Manson area. Right. But when you see this is the film clip. Now, they re-released this song, I think, in 2008, and it's a much cleaner and crisper version. But this is the song that they put out, and it's a song that's called Too Much Acid.
Working in a diner that's out of town. Freaky bad mother getting me down. Taking acid was my escape. She said drop acid, don't drop plates. So long, mother. So long, square. Going to a commune where the cats have long hair. The 50 tons of acid became a drag, then all the way to heaven. But I got jet lag. Too much acid is a bad, bad trip. Take too much and your mind will flip. LSD, freaky, out of sight, wild. San Francisco, purple haze, groovy guru, vegetarian.
You can just imagine all those little go-go dancers, can't you?
So, like, in the 60s, the Beatles tried to disguise it by singing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, LSD. Yeah. Hendrix started singing about Purple Haze and different things like that. These guys, they're just going to go straight out there. Too much acid. It's just, there's no disguising it. We're just going to sing about what it's about.
Yeah. And they were so much fun. I have to admit I didn't see them too much in their heyday, but when they performed at Pig City, they were just amazing. And you can imagine a lot of years had passed. They were 20 years older, I think, and but they were just a much more finely tuned band. So that was the Pineapples from the Dawn of Time. So we've got the psychedelic 60s. And we've got the go-betweens, which is like this intricate little thing. And one of the things that always amazed me about Brisbane is that if you would go potentially to see the Pineapples at the Dawn of Time on a Friday night.
Where would you see them, Tony? What places?
There was a little place called the Love Inn. And up above, on
in the city?
Yeah, it was in the Valley.
In the Valley,
Ann Street, the Valley. And on the floor above... where they had the bands play was the old dodgy casino. So every now and again the place would get raided by coppers, not because of the band and the music.
Oh,
but
the brown paper bag for the coppers.
So, but Pineapples at the Dawn of Time. Let's talk Pig City. So now Pig City has become... like it started life as a song. It was an independent song. It was released in '83 by a band called The Parameters.
Yep.
And it's a real crack at the corrupt and authority aspects that we saw within the Bjelke-Petersen government. It became... Andrew Stafford then wrote a book about
I've read the book.
using Pig City. And then it became a music festival in 2007. So this... Pig City terminology became sort of synonymous with Brisbane, but it's almost like a historical artifact.
Remember when Rodney Roode was banned from coming to Queensland and he came and he dressed up as a pig, like a policeman, remember? It's a theme that runs strong in Brisbane.
Absolutely. So this is a band called The Parameters, and once again they played at Pig City in 07 at Queensland Uni. And interestingly enough, we were just there between bands, you know, how you're just sort of waiting around. I think we were just about to get into like a band like the Riptides or something. And then all of a sudden these old guys seriously wearing cardigans came out on stage, right? And one had a sax and, you know, we didn't think too much of it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they rip into Pig City and we're just going, oh my God. And it could have been anyone's granddad up there. And I suppose we all get old, don't we? But
they had a message.
Yeah, they certainly did. So this is Pig City by...
Just beware. Pig City, there's a demonstration in the square. Pig City, the boys in blue are everywhere. Pig City, see the blacks in the park. Pig City, hear the door slam, hear the dogs bark. Pig City, they're keeping the city safe after dark. Pig City, the Minister for Corruption's working late. Pig City, piece of the action in race 8. Pig City, no SP here, he's ringing in the state. Pig City, the blacks at our coon have to go. Pig City, to keep big business on the go. Pig City, while Joe gets shares in Camalco. Pig City, who was the bagman, who was the hitman? Pig City, who were the frontmen, who were the big men? Pig City, in the national scam. Pig City.
did they miss anyone?
Wow.
I think they took a shot at just
great.
about everyone they possibly could. So
that music is. It's not really ska, but it reminded me a lot of ska, which is around the same time. Don't you think? With the saxophone, it's not quite ska music, but the bass prominent.
Yeah,
the drums.
And I'm happy to be corrected, but I think I believe that song was the only song that band ever put out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So what year? What year is that, Tony?
Pig City was 83.
83.
Now I'm going to play another song now that's around the same sort of a theme, but back in the and you've talked about this a couple of times. The Police investment in the music scene in Brisbane was often to get there and stop things and bash people and arrest them, and it was just this real problem, and no one really had a lot of faith putting out doing an event or putting out stuff. It wasn't uncommon for both for police, both the uniformed and what they called the special branch plainclothes, to regularly break up concerts. And this was one of the bands that had their concerts regularly broken up. Now, the band's called Razor, the song's called Task Force, and interestingly enough, in the show notes, I'm going to provide a link back to a Facebook page that shows this same band in 2018, obviously a lot older, but playing the song with the same sort of spirit. And I think it's a fantastic replication that, while age may weary us, it certainly doesn't dull the fight. So this is a punk band. They were called Razor, and the song is called Task Force.
Righto, you kids. I heard you swearing. I'm putting you away.
Good little song, isn't it?
That's freaking awesome. You know what? I was just thinking, you talked about the Fitzgerald inquiry before, and people, when they think about that, they think, it's all the political moves to get to this point. But really, the roots of all that dissent starts with bands and young kids like that going out in public and singing the truth, and that's what builds that's what builds the protest, and eventually that filters upwards into the people that can actually go and make the change. But without bands like that, like the Saints and those guys, actually going there and singing about the truth, getting out and protesting. That's why we protest.
Absolutely.
It does make a difference.
And Brisbane actually had a thriving punk scene, as I'm sure most cities in Australia did. But I might get the bands wrong, but there were massive confrontations. I think that it might have been the Dead Kennedys that played here one time.
Right.
Or it was either the Dead Kennedys or the Damned.
Okay.
And it just, like, front page news the next day, you know, the punks and...
Yeah,
and
they're gonna end the world.
Yeah,
because their kids having a bit of fun.
And so that was just once again, it's just an amazing little part of Brisbane. And I would encourage anyone who's listening who wants to share some Sydney history or Melbourne history or
Well,
Adelaide
those guys
history.
remind me of Radio Birdman,
Yeah,
didn't they? You know, from Perth, I think originally Radio Birdman. Is that right?
I think Lovelock is.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was Razor. Now, this next band is probably going to get the shits with me because I'm going to play a song that they probably tried to distance themselves away from. So this is a band called President's 11. And
President's 11. I'm writing some of these down, Tony, because when I go finish this podcast, I'm going to go back to my guests and I'm going to say, what songs did you play? President's 11.
Yeah, so these guys, and once again, around the suburb of Corinda. So these guys came out of Corinda. So, you look at the Saints, they were Corinda, Oxley, Inala. So it's, and I'm sure that there's pockets of suburbs everywhere where these musos
It sounds like a cricket team, Tony.
It does.
The President's 11.
President's 11. So they started life as, funnily enough, a punk band, and they played a lot of covers.
Yeah.
But they started to evolve, and the song that I'm going to play is a song called Summer Vacation, which is a real little, well, for want of another word, it's a pop song. And it made the top, it was number one in the top 100 for Triple Z up here in 84. And I'm positive it went 2 years in a row, but once again, happy to be proved wrong.
Are we in the 80s here?
We're in the 80s, 84.
Okay.
They put out this album, it was an EP, called Hold On.
Yep.
And that's what the guys look like. So they started life as a... Yeah, so they started life as a punk band. They put out this song called Summer Vacation. And it's a song people just love. And once again, really representative of Brisbane, even though the band desperately tried to, in many ways, distance themselves from it.
Okay.
So this is Summer Vacation by President's 11. Bit of an extended intro.
Forget my aggravations, forget my aggravations, living in city situations, living in city desperation. Lose all of my vision, I've got no recognition, got heaps of indecision and heaps of indigestion. Forget my aggravations, living in city situations, living in city desperation. Take a summer vacation, take a summer vacation, let's go.
So very far removed from punk, isn't it?
It's a weird sort of thing, yeah. I'm not sure what sort of style it is. It's got the bass line from Love Cats.
But once again, just loved by the people. And I noticed on one of the Brisbane band pages, someone posted it up as, that video from YouTube. And people just, hundreds of comments saying, I love that song, I love that song. And then when you read about the band who were then trying to distance themselves, Hold On, their EP was actually really well received critically, but they had production issues with it. So apparently the album was melting, I think. So, yeah, very interesting times. So
that was different.
Yeah, it was different. I'm going to play... I won't do much of an intro because we're still really hopeful that we'll be talking to this particular person in the coming weeks. But this is a band called the Screaming Tribesman. And before everyone gets up and say, Tony, they're a Sydney band. They were formed in Brisbane in 81 by Mick Madoo.
It's like State of Origin.
It is. He's a Queenslander. John Hartley was on bass. Murray Shepherd, Brad Shepherd's brother, was on drums. They came out of the Fun Things, which was pretty much the same sort of band, but had Ron Pino in there. And as you know, Ron Pino's just got one of the songwriter extraordinaires in Brisbane. And this is a song that was co-written by Madoo and Pino. And once again, just a mainstay of the Triple Z Hot 100. It's just a song that is really typical and really representative of Brisbane. It's a song called Igloo. So this
That song's about, Tony?
I actually read a little bit about Pino. The words came to him one night because I think Pino gets credited with a lot of the lyrics out of that particular song.
Yep.
And it was really about, like, he just woke up with that, the chorus, how it goes, it's all white, all... And the song evolved from there. So,
okay. But
I am looking forward to talking with
we'll
Nick
find out
about what that song is fundamentally about, because it's that song, just the way it goes, it's like an anthem song to me. You could imagine 100,000 people at Wembley singing along to that particular song. It's just got that real anthem-y feel. And when you sit back and you look at a lot of the other Tribesman stuff that came out after that, it's really punchy rock and roll.
Yeah.
Whereas that's a really layered sort of a song. So you can see, I think the Pinot influence is really clearly in that one.
Okay.
Very similar to their next song that they put out, which was called A Stand Alone. So I think Ron had a bit in that as well. And then, so it's a little bit more moody, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So that was the Tribesmen. They relocated to Sydney in '83, so they did effectively become a Sydney band, but we will take them as a Queenslander. Now, the next band, seriously, 4 years, fundamentally, they produced music as the Riptides, right? So anyone out there from Queensland will know the Riptides. So they formed around 77, and they had a couple of cracks at different bands. They became the Numbers for a while.
Oh, yeah.
But there was a band in Sydney called the Numbers. So they
that's
pulled
maybe
back.
what I'm thinking of. Yeah, okay.
So they actually released their first song as the Numbers. So, and their first song is the one that I'll be playing tonight. Then they changed to the Riptides. Mark Callahan was the real brainchild by it. There was a Robert Vickers, once again, who ended up playing with the Go-Betweens, was one of those people. Michael Hiren was one of the Riptides. He played with Pineapples from the Dawns of Time, so it becomes a real incestuous little place. They reformed in '87 and put out a live album called Riptides Resurface. And once again, just an absolute rip snorter. I remember seeing them at the Roxy in the Valley, and it was just full on. And I hadn't seen them in their 79 to 83 sort of period.
Yep.
But to see them in 87 was almost like it was just so awesome. And once again, they reformed in 2007 for Pig City.
But, I mean, that's early, like 70s. Wow. You know, that's like the Saints. That's early.
Yeah. It's another little interesting fact. Callahan, so Buzz Bistrup from the Angels produced a bit of the Riptide stuff. And then Callahan started Ganga Jang with Bistrup.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I saw Ganga Jang probably 2 years ago now, and Cal played a number of cover versions from other band members of previous bands that they'd been in. Didn't touch the Riptides, and which I found really quite strange, because I'm sure that I, as well as many other people, would have been waiting to hear an old Riptides tune.
Well, especially Brisbane people, yeah.
Yeah, so this song's called 77 Sunset Strip.
Oh, yeah.
All my friends had told me you were someone else, darling. I couldn't believe them. Oh, what could this love mean? I waited patiently for a chance to meet you, but now you've gone away. Say, wow, what can I do? Why don't you ask about a 77 Sunset Strip? All the boys and girls are gonna find you out. 77 Sunset Strip, oh yeah, this love is real. 77 Sunset Strip, all the boys and girls are gonna find you out. 77 Sunset Strip, oh yeah, oh yeah. See you every day at the school where you're standing around and you look so fine. I need to talk to you, just name the time and place. Oh girl, I need to say I love you now and I always will, yeah. But now I find you gone away. Say, wow, what can I do? Why don't you ask about a 77 Sunset Strip? All the boys and girls are gonna find you out. 77 Sunset Strip, oh yeah, this love is real. 77 Sunset Strip, all the boys and girls find you out. 77 Sunset Strip, oh yeah, oh yeah. Come on now. Sunset Strip, all the boys and girls are gonna find you out. 77 Sunset Strip, oh yeah.
So I think I've tried to provide as much of a broad section as I could.
You know, that they're trying to that clip there.
Yeah,
They're doing the Beach Boys,
yeah.
don't you reckon? I mean,
They were
they're
sort
a surf
of
band. That's a surf song.
yeah. They were viewed by many as a surf band, but I don't reckon Cal's gone in the surf ever.
No, but I mean, just the look, and even the drummer. It's got the Beach Boys had their famous strip where they all wore those stripes down there. The drummer's wearing that,
yeah,
and I mean, obviously, the Riptides and Sunset Strip.
yeah.
Wow!
It's,
and he's got this. Did you notice he's wearing the same glasses as me?
Oh, so you've got taste of Mark Callahan back in the early '80s.
That's funny, Tony.
So, Riptides put out a song. I think one of their only songs that got some sort of semblance on the charts is a song called "Hearts and Flowers," and it's just it would be described as a little bit slower, but a little bit. It's a nice little pop song. But that was the Riptides. So I'm going to finish with the only band that I could finish with, and
Yeah, I'm already writing it down.
so this is the Saints, and you know, when you think about the history of the Saints, when you think about how they started, you think about, you know, who they were at the beginning. You know, when I look at this film clip, I see a fresh-faced Ed Cooper, I see a fresh-faced Chris Bailey, and I really truly wondered what they were there just to play music, I'm sort of thinking. And if they were to be transported, say, 50 years in time, and like Bruce Springsteen did a Saint song as a cover.
Yeah, well, this is because this is a whole other level of songwriting.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm not going to put down any of the bands you've played, you know, before this, but this is as far as the songwriting goes.
Yeah, and continue to improve. And of course,
Yeah.
Ed Cooper left the Saints. But when you look at Ed once again in this video clip, he is just the typical sort of guitarist. And he started a band called the Laughing Clowns, who put out one of the great Australian songs called Eternally Yours.
Right.
And then he had did a number of different Ed Cooper type things. And I went to see him once with his band at East Leagues Club, and me and my mate Scotty, and how are you, Scotty and Sack? I hope you're listening to this. But me and my mate Scotty, all we wanted to do was make him laugh, because he's such a serious muso, Ed Cooper, just really, and we just couldn't do it. We were right there staring at him, just trying to make him laugh, and he's just so focused. So serious. But here is the Saints. This is the song that started it all for them. And it's interesting, they were picked up in the UK because of this song. No one in Australia wanted to release it, so they had to release it independently. They went to the UK, and the UK were expecting, you know, the ripped jeans, the mohawks, you know, and Chris Bailey and the boys walked in, and they were just, for want of another word, bogans from Brisbane. So this is...
They were real fucking punks, man.
Their music was, and they didn't give a shit, you know, and once again, have a look at Bailey here, and then just Chris Bailey, and then just think about the impact that he has had. Think about the impact Ed Cooper's had, and you see these guys as fresh-faced people, not understanding what's going to happen to them throughout their life.
Like a snake calling on a phone. I've got no time to be alone. Summer coming at me all the time. You better think I lose my mind. Cause I'm stranded on my own. Stranded far from home. Alright. I'm riding on a midnight train, but everybody just look the same. It's something like a dirty reflection. I'm lost, babe, I've got no direction. And I'm stranded on my own. Stranded far from home. Alright. Stranded, I'm so far from home. Stranded, yeah, I'm on my own. Stranded, you gotta leave me alone. Cause I'm stranded on my own. Stranded far from home. Come on. Doesn't matter without you. Play the man thing I can't do. You lost your mind stuck in a world. Your honey's such a stupid girl. Now I'm stranded on my own. Stranded far from home. Come on. Stranded, I'm so far from home. Stranded, yeah, I'm on my own. Stranded, you gotta leave me alone. Cause I'm stranded on my own. Stranded, far from home. Alright. Living in a world insane. The cut is so hard as the brain. The bill never love will do. Your baby don't know how it hurts to be stranded on your own. Stranded far from home. Alright. Stranded, I'm so far from home. Stranded, yeah, I'm on my own. Stranded, you got to leave me alone. Come on. Stranded, I'm so far from home. Stranded, yeah, I'm on my own. Stranded, you got to leave me alone. Cause I'm stranded on my own. Stranded.
And that was the Saints. And
Chris Bailey, what a look. He's got the jacket on and a t-shirt. That's so... what a
and
look.
People wear that now.
And his hair over his eyes.
I reckon I went to high school with at least 8 people that look like Chris Bailey.
Oh, man. That's killer.
And what
Love
a great song. What an awesome song. So, and very, very simple song. So that was Songs That Shape Brisbane. So I hope that everyone enjoyed that. And, of course, I'm not saying they're the best. I'm not saying they're the most definitive songs. I'm sure that everyone's got their own musical taste. But to me, that's all part of the eclectic.
Mate, I think you
captured
a time in Brisbane where people were so frustrated with the government and with people felt like they were stranded.
Yeah.
You know, that's why that song is the one, because that's exactly how I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a bit young for 77, 78 when that was, you know. Well, that's even earlier. Is it 76, is it?
It's
Or was it even
77.
earlier?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
77,
so
I think the Saints
I
were.
was a bit young for that. I'm only 10 or 12, but it must have been so. You've perfectly captured Brisbane in the late 70s, early 80s with that.
I think also anyone who lived in Brisbane at the time, that opening song from the opening lyrics from Stranded's, where he's talking about I'm on the midnight train.
Yeah,
people knew that trains didn't run past 11 o'clock. So if you're in the city and you missed the 11 o'clock train,
you're fucked.
You were stranded. You were stranded. So
that's great.
And Chris, I've heard him talk about that's one of the main reasons where the song came from, because Brisbane was certainly not a 24/7 city. So so
really good, mate. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. So I hope everyone else did. And if you've got any comments around what I missed and what I didn't miss, ups and downs, Voodoo Lust, there was a band called Dirk and the Rebels, and they were a bit of a takeoff of like he modelled himself on Tom Petty. And I actually used to work at McDonald's in the city with young Dirk back in the day. So there are so many Brisbane bands. I'm sure that there's so many Sydney bands. So
I think you've set a good precedent here. I think we can build on this Brisbane little thing.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing in the future, Tony, where we do one where we just go into the future a little bit more from where you've been, and we do Powderfinger.
Yeah.
Regurgitator.
Yeah.
Fucking Custard.
Yeah. Well, Powderfinger willingly and knowingly and acknowledge the bands that came before him. And
I'm sure Custard do too, and the Gurge.
Yeah.
Surely.
An open invitation to anyone who wants to talk about Sydney music around the same time. We'd be talking Spy versus Spy. We'd be talking some of those bands, and
Sunny Boys.
And now when you hear about music venues, more and more of them are closing. You get really quite despondent, because you think, where are these bands going to come from? Where is this energy? Where is this industry going to come from? So.
Right, am I doing the 7-inch?
Yeah, you go first.
I'm going right across the country.
Okay, cool.
Right across to the other side. I'm pretty sure these guys from Perth. Actually, I'm sure they're from Perth, but they had a few hits, and it's an album I think you have, Tony, and it's an album I have. It's an album I love. It's one of my favourite albums.
Oh, it is.
And I know this is singles, so I'm going to do singles, but I thought I'd do all the three that I've managed to scrounge and find and dig through music record stores from Sydney to Melbourne to Brisbane to Adelaide. So I'm going to do it. I've got The Boys, When You're Lonely.
Yeah.
People don't know who this band is. Just freaking look it up. It's amazing.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing with them is that they're not on streaming platforms, and I wish they were, because their music is just so powerful.
The Boys, Wayo, Wayo, Wayo.
Yeah.
And the rarest of the rare, I think. Maybe there's another one. Hurt Me Baby.
Yeah.
Look at that cover.
And every single song on that album, and I know you've got the album, I've got it on CD. Every single song is a rip snorter.
It's a cracker.
Yeah. It's just one of the best ever albums put out in Australia, without a doubt.
I compare it, and this is not like, it's not because of the genre of music, but you know how if you listen to Fleetwood Mac Rumours, every song is a banger. I'll go out on the ledge and say every song on this is a banger. It's not the same sort of music. It's Oz rock. If you had to meet an alien and say, what does Australian music from that time sound, Oz rock sound like? I'd just play on this album. Look it up, people, please.
Yeah, they actually had a little bit of chart success too, if I remember
Yeah, they're
rightly.
on Countdown a couple of times,
Yeah, so if you look them up, they're on YouTube, definitely. So, and maybe we should do a whole show based around the Boys.
We should just do that album.
Yeah.
Play that whole album. And I'll tell you about every song.
Now, I'm going to share a bit of a story about this one. The Triple J Hottest 100 came and went recently, as we know, and the number one song was a cover version that had been put together by the Wiggles.
Yes.
And there was a little bit of a discussion on the Lime Spiders page. And,
what did they say?
Mick Blood wasn't incredibly impressed that the Wiggles were now the Triple J Hottest 100. And that being said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. There was a lot of people that agreed, some people didn't, but the funny and interesting thing is, I sort of made a bit of a comment, and Mick and I have connected, which may give you a bit of a hint about what may be coming up soon in the show. But this was where the Wiggles initially came from, and the Wiggles were, in fact, well, the majority of the Wiggles were the Cockroaches back in the 80s and the early 90s. And this is one of their singles called Another Night Alone. And you can see some...
We've got Jeff was in there, wasn't he?
Yeah. And
Jeff Fat.
Yeah.
And Anthony.
Paul. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the brother here was one of the main movers as to why they went that way.
Yeah, and he became Captain Feathersword.
Yeah. So, and these two, I think, Henry and Robinson, I think the bass player's name was.
Yeah.
But they were so much fun to see live.
Yeah, I supported them.
Did you really?
At the sound show, yep.
That would have been so much fun.
They were great, man. They went off. That was Townsville Sound Show.
And the first time I ever saw him was at a suburban pub in Brisbane. And it was one of them, the lead singer, John, I think, was if I got the names wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm sure John was a school teacher.
Yes.
So whenever they toured, and John was in school, of course he couldn't tour. So the other brother would just step up and be the lead singer.
Yeah, which is Anthony.
Yeah. So, and they were just so much fun. Wait Up is another great song. Saturday Night.
It's a great song they covered, the Wiggles.
Yeah,
I think, and I mean, I don't care either way. It's a good song they covered. They did a good job of covering it.
Yeah,
I actually liked that whole top 10. I don't know if you listened to the whole top 10. I made sure I did.
Yeah,
play them, and I played it to my wife as well. The whole top 10. I even like the song by what's his face with Justin Bieber. I think that's a great little pop song as well. I mean, I'm a sucker for a pop song, so...
I think Triple J have certainly hit something really, really strongly in respect of like a version. It resonates with people. Every song's slightly different to the original. It's giving people a bit more awareness. So I think that, at the end of the day...
And if you think about the age group that tunes in Triple J now, I know that I still do, and you probably still do as well, tune in Triple J. They all grew up with the Wiggles, that age group.
Yeah, absolutely. It
wouldn't have been hard to vote for it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's show 49.
Well done. A good show, Tony.
We've got show 50 and next week, and we're hoping it's a cracker for you all. So I don't want to announce it. I don't want to jinx it, but hopefully it's going to be something that's a little bit different and something that's a bit full on. So coming up we are talking with there's a record store here in Brisbane. The owners have been in the game for 30, 40, 50 years, I think. So
I look forward to that.
We'll be talking with them. There's a lady over at Minjirabar, which is North Stradbroke Island, which most people know about. It's North Stradbroke, who does sound therapy. So I'm really, but she's also does country music. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with her. Mick Madou's still there, so we're still talking with Mick. And so we've got a couple of really great shows that are going to be coming up. There's a Brisbane band called the Mangroves. Seriously, it's one of the biggest fun piss take bands I've heard for a long, long time. Really good musicians. And they also do another podcast around the suburbs of Brisbane. So we'll see how that one goes. But that's what's coming up. As you know, follow us on Facebook, YouTube. We've put all our shows up there. And thanks for tuning in. In the words of Jagger and Richards, it's only rock and roll.
But I love it.
See yous.
See ya.